In this video, I'm going to talk about Esperanto, the international language. Esperanto is a constructed language, or conlang. It didn't evolve naturally like most languages, but was instead intentionally created. The creator was L.L. Zamenhof, a Polish ophthalmologist. He developed it throughout the 1870s and 1880s, with the first grammar published in 1887. The language was created to serve as an international auxiliary language. That is, a universal language that people all over the world can learn, which they can use to communicate with people from different linguistic backgrounds. It's intended as an auxiliary language, meaning it's not intended to replace existing languages, but to be learned in addition to everyone's native language. It was originally just called La Lingua Internazia, or the international language, but Zamenhof wrote under the pen name Doctoro Esperanto, roughly translating as Dr. Hoper, and this name was soon applied to the language, and that's how it's known today. Zamenhof hoped that if everyone shared a common language that they could use to communicate with people from different cultures, it would promote cross-cultural understanding and ultimately world peace. To help achieve this goal, the language was designed to be simplified and easy for anybody to learn. How well it succeeds at this goal is debatable, but the grammar is certainly much more regular than most natural languages. Esperanto is by far the most widely spoken conlang, although estimates for how many people speak it vary wildly. Some place the number as low as 30,000, while others put it as high as 2 million. The lower estimates are probably more accurate, and it's likely that the higher estimates include a large proportion of people who have studied a little bit of Esperanto but don't actually speak it. There are also approximately 1,000 people who speak Esperanto as a native language, in addition to another natural language. The phonology is basically a simplified version of Belarusian phonology. The Esperanto alphabet is a version of the Latin alphabet, and is completely phonemic. Each letter represents one sound, and each sound is represented by one letter. The alphabet consists of 28 letters, 22 of the 26 basic Latin letters, plus 6 letters with diacritic marks, which are considered distinct from their base letter. The majority of the sounds in Esperanto have direct equivalents in English, although there are a few that can cause minor problems. The letter C is pronounced as ts, like a T sound followed by an S sound, as in the English word hats. However, in Esperanto, this sound can also appear at the start of a word. The Esperanto word for 100, spelled cent, is pronounced cent, not cent. The sound represented by the H with circumflex is ch, which is the same as the German Achlaut, as in Bach. There aren't many words with this sound, and most words that do have it have alternate versions which replace it with a simple K. Chemio means chemistry, but it has the alternative, more common form, chemio. The rhotic, represented by the letter R, is supposed to be trilled, but any rhotic sound can be used without risk of confusion. The vowels are the standard 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, U. There are also 6 diphthongs, I, A, Oi, Ui, Ow, and O. All of these except O have direct English equivalents. Stress is completely regular. It always falls on the penultimate syllable. The majority of Esperanto vocabulary, or a bit over 80%, is taken from Latin and the Romance languages. Most of the remainder is taken from Germanic languages, mainly English and German, with smaller amounts of words taken from other languages. Esperanto has relatively few root words, which are combined with affixes to create new words. As an example, the suffix ilo can be attached to a root to create a new word meaning a tool that is used for something. Tranchi means to cut, tranchilo means knife, or literally a tool for cutting. Similarly, a camera is a fotografilo. One particularly productive affix is the mal prefix, which indicates the opposite. Instead of having a word for bad, you just say malbona, literally meaning ungood. Instead of having a word for small, you say malgranda, or unbig. And instead of having a word for cold, you say malvarma or unhot. There are many more affixes like these, and using them to logically derive new words from basic root words greatly reduces the number of words that a learner has to memorize before they can start to communicate. Nouns inflect for number, singular and plural, as well as case, nominative and accusative. The basic nominative singular form of a noun always ends in o. For example, hundo, domo, viro. To form the plural, you just add y. And to form the accusative case, you just add n, which comes after the y if it's plural. The plural of hundo is hundoi. The accusative forms are hundon and hundoin, respectively. The nominative case is used for the subject of a sentence, la hundoi kuras, or the dogs run. The accusative is used for the direct object of a sentence, as in mi ŝatas hundoin, I like dogs. The use of the accusative case allows for theoretically free word order. The previous sentence could also be rephrased as hundoin ŝatas mi or ŝatas hundoin mi, among other possible word orders, without changing the meaning. The case makes it clear who the subject and object are. In practice, however, the overwhelming majority of sentences follow subject, verb, object word order. Nouns in Esperanto do not have grammatical gender, but there is a strong gender distinction. The majority of words for people are masculine by default, and the feminine equivalents are formed by adding the in suffix. This is somewhat similar to the s suffix in English. Actoro is an actor. Actorino is an actress. Princo is a prince. Princino is a princess. However, the Esperanto suffix is used much more frequently than its English equivalent. It's used on many words where English would have the same word for both males and females. Instruisto is a male teacher, while a female teacher would be instruistino. The suffix is also used on basic words. The most common word for woman is virino, derived from the word viro, meaning man. And the word for mother is patrino, derived from patro, meaning father. The feminine suffix is also used with some words for animals. Coco is a rooster, coquino is a hen, vulpo is a fox, vulpino is a vixen. The definite article in Esperanto is la. There is no indefinite article. Indefiniteness is indicated simply by the lack of a definite article. The house is la domo, while a house is just domo. The definite article remains the same when used with plural or accusative nouns. La domoi, la domon, la domoin. Adjectives in their basic form always end with a, such as rapida, granda, bona. Adjectives inflect to match the number and case of the noun they refer to. The plural is formed by adding y, and the accusative by adding n, just like the noun endings. La hundoi estas rapidae, the dogs are quick. Because hundoi is plural, rapidae must also be plural. Vi havas grandan domon, you have a big house. Domon is accusative, so grandan has to be accusative as well. Adjectives may be placed either before or after the noun. The previous sentence could be rephrased as Vi havas domon grandan. Placing adjectives before nouns is by far more common, though. Adjectives can be turned into adverbs by changing the final a to e. Adverbs do not inflect any further. La hundoi kuras rapide. Verbs, especially verbal participles, are generally the most complex part of Esperanto grammar, although they're still far simpler than in many natural languages. The infinitive form of a verb always ends in e, as in skribi, esperi, trinki. The main verb forms are the past, present, and future. There are also conditional and imperative moods. The past tense ends in is, the present in as, and the future in os. For the verb skribi, or to write, the past tense is skribis, the present tense is skribas, and the future tense is skribos. Unlike most European languages, the verb endings are the same regardless of the subject. English has relatively little verb inflection, but we do still have S on third person singular. I write, but he writes. In Esperanto, the verb is the same regardless. Mi skribas, li skribas. These forms don't mark any sort of aspectual distinction. So for example, skribis could translate as wrote, but it could also translate as have written or was writing. If you want to indicate these distinctions, the participle forms of the verb can be used. Participles are probably the single most complex part of Esperanto grammar. They're adjectives derived from verbs and can be used to modify nouns, but they also let you express more specific aspectual distinctions, such as I was writing, mi estis skribanta, versus I have written, mi estas skribinta. They can be a little confusing at first, but they are very regular, and once you understand the logic, they are quite easy to use. There have been a number of criticisms of Esperanto. I'll be focusing on 3 that I think are the main ones. 1, it's sexist. 2, it's Eurocentric. And 3, it's not as simple as it should be. Criticism 1, it's sexist. It's both pretty obvious and very easily fixable. When your word for woman basically translates as a female man, it's not hard to see why people say it's sexist. To be somewhat fair, this is based on how many natural languages, especially European languages, handle gender, although none of them take it quite as far as Esperanto. Every natural language I'm aware of has at least a distinct root for basic words like woman and mother. And also, it's a conlang. Zamenhof didn't have to copy what natural languages do. This problem's easily solvable. Simply redefine all root words to be gender neutral, and make the feminine suffix optional, and then add an optional masculine suffix that can be used if gender is important. There have been a few proposals that basically do this, which have gained varying levels of use, but none of them are officially accepted. The most popular proposal uses ich for masculine. For example, instruisto would be a teacher, whether male or female, and then if gender is important, you can use instruistino for a female teacher and instruisticho for a male teacher. 2, it's Eurocentric. This is also obvious, but I don't think it's as much of a problem as some others do. The vocabulary is overwhelmingly European, specifically Western European. This does give speakers of European languages an advantage in learning it, but there isn't really a simple way to fix this. You'd basically have to rebuild the entire vocabulary of the language from the ground up, incorporating words from a wide range of sources. And while this would certainly make it harder for speakers of European languages, it's unclear how much easier it would make it for speakers of other languages. No matter what you do, most of the words are going to be unrecognizable to speakers of most languages. I think there's actually a strong argument to be made that Zamenhof should have just gone all out with making the vocabulary Romance-based. A few token Germanic roots don't really make the language significantly more international, and Romance words are generally much more widely recognizable due to the historic importance of Latin as the language of science and the widespread use of Spanish and French throughout South America and Africa. Lastly, Esperanto is unnecessarily complex. Although the grammar is generally more regular than most languages, Esperanto has quite a bit of needless complexity. Basically, most of the inflections on words could be made optional. Plenty of languages get by just fine with optional plurality marking only when relevant. Think about it. How often is plurality both important and not clear from context? Or you don't even need an explicit plural marker at all. If it's important, you can use numbers, say something like 5 dog, or something like many dog, if it's important that there's more than one but you don't know the exact number. The accusative case is also mostly pointless. The idea of having an accusative case was to allow for free word order. But the overwhelming majority of sentences follow SVO word order anyway, so the case markings serve no purpose. If you really wanted to keep word order, you could make the case markings optional and only have them required when a sentence doesn't follow SVO order. Probably the most useless feature is adjectives agreeing with the noun they modify. Like case, this was supposed to enable freer word order, but adjectives almost always come before the noun anyway. There's very little risk of confusion if they don't agree. Likewise for verb conjugation, plenty of languages get by without it. Tense can be marked optionally or expressed by things like adverbs. Something like I already eat or I eat soon clearly indicate past or future actions, even if the verb doesn't have an explicit tense marker. At least the participle forms are optional. I can definitely imagine an alternate universe where Zamenhof decided that the use of the participles was mandatory. The phonology and phonotactics have also been criticized for excessive difficulty. The phonological inventory has a few distinctions that are hard for speakers of many languages. The LR distinction is difficult for speakers of certain languages like Japanese. And the four-way distinction between sh, ch, zh, and j is relatively rare, with speakers of many languages having issues with distinguishing these sounds. Zamenhof appears to have been partly aware of this, so there are few pairs of words that are distinguished solely by these sounds, but it would have been better if they weren't distinct at all. The phonotactics are also pretty loosely defined and allow for pretty large consonant clusters by global standards, as in words like instrui or dextra. If you're a native English speaker, these words probably don't seem that strange to you, because English also allows long strings of consonants in a row. Many languages don't. In a considerable minority of languages, all consonants must be followed by a vowel. Even among languages that do allow some consonant clusters, many only allow clusters of 2 and not of 3 or 4. Speakers of these languages can, of course, learn to pronounce these clusters, but for a constructed language that was specifically designed to be easy to learn, they shouldn't have to. English speakers don't get away entirely free either. Although most of the vocabulary is easy for English speakers to pronounce, there are a few words like "ci," which will take a bit of practice to pronounce fluently. A number of other conlangs have been created based on Esperanto. These are known collectively as Esperantidoi. They generally attempt to address some of the criticisms to varying extents. None of these have been anywhere near as successful as the original, with the most widely spoken, Edo, having only a few hundred speakers, compared to Esperanto's tens of thousands to millions of speakers. Esperanto has largely failed at its goal of being an international auxiliary language, but it hasn't been a total failure overall. Esperanto has a small but very dedicated community, which is more than can be said for most constructed languages. There are people producing books, music, and even feature-length movies in Esperanto. Did you know, shortly before Star Trek started filming, William Shatner appeared in an Esperanto horror movie called Incubus. The film was considered lost media for many years, after the original negatives and most of the prints were destroyed in a fire. But fortunately, a copy was found and restored in the early 2000s. Recently, the internet has helped to revitalize the language by allowing Esperanto speakers from all around the world to meet online. Duolingo offers Esperanto as one of its language courses, and there are a few websites like Leonu dedicated solely to teaching Esperanto. It's unlikely Esperanto will ever become the international language, but it has become a living language with a global community, and that's still pretty impressive.